Yeah, I think it's just important, obviously, as we said, to know your audience and to know what intent they have. And also, you need to show up where they are. You need to be at every stage of the funnel, every stage of the journey, and make sure that your brand is visible there and you're known as a trustworthy source. I'm Sean Barber, and this is SEO in 2026.
Sean, what's your number one SEO tip for 2026?
My SEO tip is to think beyond Google. The search landscape has gone way further now than just Google.
So what are we defining as beyond Google? Are you talking about AI search engines, social media? Is there any limit?
Yeah, I think it's twofold, really. I think the fact that users now aren't just starting their search journey on Google. They're starting it all different platforms and places, Also, that's not just the start of their journey. They're bouncing around. So they're going to Google, then they may go to Reddit. They may even go to like Amazon or their large language models. And then on the flip side, AI models are coming into play a lot more now. So they're also bringing in using different sources to gather the information they need about a certain query or brand, for example.
So how does an SEO know what to focus on beyond Google? Because there seems to be almost no limit to the number of AI search engines or other social search type platforms, social discovery type platforms that SEOs could potentially be involved in as well. So how do you pick the ones that are most relevant for the business, or should an SEO simply just try to be everywhere if possible?
Yeah, it's a great point, and it can become, if you think about it like that, it becomes quite overwhelming because, I'm sure we're all very busy in our day-to-day job anyway, just doing the basics, but the fundamentals is actually knowing who your users are. That is the main purpose behind it. That's the main thing that you should know. You need to know where they're searching, where they're going, before they come to your website, where they're going afterwards, what are their intent, what do they actually expect when they land on your site or when they search, for example, if you're e-commerce, people are looking for pictures of the product, information about the product, however, if you're looking to resolve a problem, you may go directly to YouTube and want, a video that explains how to resolve that problem. So you need to understand what your users actually want. There's no point writing a whole essay on what are shoes. If people are looking to buy shoes, they want to actually just see the shoes and what they're all about.
Okay, so is there any data behind helping an SEO to make this decision with regarding to what other platforms to focus on? Or is it all about just understanding the business, understanding the audience, and doing research on what platforms are most suitable for that?
Yeah, again, it's a multiple sort of answer in the fact that, one, you really need to understand what your business is all about, what your goals and objectives, who you actually trying to reach. Funny enough, a lot of businesses still don't have that actually, sorted out. So you need to really understand that, and across the organization, everyone has to know that. And then you need to go out and do your research, as you say, you're kind of, in terms of understanding your user. So using different tools, using obviously like Google Analytics, Google Search Console, different legacy tools that I won't mention, but there are ways you can understand, as I said previously, is understanding what kind of searches and queries people are using to find you or your competitors, understanding what websites they're going to, including yours, or where they're going afterwards, where they're coming from. All these sort of things, compiling them together will give you a better understanding of who your actual users are. And then also you can also do, actually interviewing and tracking your users, actually reach out to your users and actually directly talk to them, or talk to your customer service team, for example, because they're going to have a lot more insights about who they are, what they want, and where they go.
Okay, so then you've established that you can then make some sort of more of an educated decision on what platforms to target. So what would be an example of a platform that you've chosen to optimize beyond Google, and how have you gone about optimizing for that?
Yeah, it's a great question again. I mean, I think also I need to lay out that the reason you need to kind of do this, especially if these large language models, for example, and AI models, like I said before, they're scraping all different platforms and data sets to understand who this brand is, what do they do, could they be trusted, should they be trusted? And you have to, it's a job now, and I don't know if it's just going to be SEOs, but generally the marketing teams are going to have to make sure you're consistent across the board. So for example, local listings, if your local listings aren't, accurate and they're not consistent with what your website's saying, and other local listings, if your Google Maps, your Apple Maps are inconsistent, that's going to be a problem down the line, not only in terms of these AI models, but for users, it's not a very good trust signal. Additionally, if you're lucky enough to have a Wikipedia page, is everything on there optimized? Is it truthful? Is it accurate? Is it up to date? So there's some examples, but obviously it all depends on the industry. You could go to your Amazon, for example. YouTube is obviously the second biggest search engine in the world. Could you optimize your YouTube channel? Can you make better use of it? Could you do shorts and stuff like that to reach different audiences? So yeah, it all depends, but they're the kind of some of the things you could look at.
Okay, and how do you measure the impact of this? Because obviously if users have many different touch points, it's difficult to get a sense of where they're going on their journey before deciding to come to buy from you.
Yeah, and this is getting difficult now, isn't it? Because of this new world we're living in. Google are doing some things to search that makes it difficult to track. And everyone's experiences are very fragmented and personalized, so making it very difficult for us SEOs to understand what the hell is going on. But there are ways, there are tools out there that are kind of developing where you can track your visibility and your share of voice in the sector that you're looking at, or a certain topic that you want to be dominant for. And then also it's about tracking the bottom line, because if people are still landing on your website, it might be less traffic coming now, but are they still converting? How are they getting through the journey? And basically is your bottom line, what's that looking like? The revenue, the conversions, you're going to have a better understanding of those attribution models. How is organic and all the other channels that you're trying to optimize play as a part in terms of reaching those users throughout the funnel, throughout their journey to convert in the end.
What does this all mean for keyword research? If we're moving beyond Google as a means to search, there are different styles of searching. There's more conversational interaction with AIs, and there's organic discovery opportunities that don't necessarily mean that a keyword has been searched. Is the keyword history?
It's something I'm really looking into because it is fascinating. I don't think it's history. Obviously, keywords play are the fundamentals to creating content, and you still need to create content, whether that's on social media, on your website, YouTube, whatever. So you need to know what people are searching for. Obviously, queries are going to get a lot more longer and conversational. We're seeing that pattern, but you need the fundamentals to build this. So you need to kind of know your topic area back to front, and those sort of keywords will help you understand that. But yeah, it's going to be interesting, especially with changes Google made recently to know search volumes and, rankings and stuff like that. It's going to be slightly different. But I think if you cover a topic well enough, using the right sort of terminology, you're going to do okay.
We want to do more than okay, don't we? We want to be the best. But you talk about knowing your topic area back to front. How do you get to know your topic area back to front?
Yeah, again, it's multiple steps. So you really have to research from different sources. So you've got your kind of Google Search Console data. That's a great resource to know where how they're finding those different pages on your site. Obviously, you've got other tools that give you access to what kind of questions people are asking around a certain topic. You can look at your competitors and see what gaps are there in terms of what people aren't covering. And obviously now the large language models, AI generally, AI mode and so on, are giving you great direction in terms of what people are following up on certain topics and queries. So giving you a really good understanding of that, technical term of query fanning in terms of like understanding where people are going on that journey. So if you can cover that with obviously unique and fresh content, something your competitors aren't doing, then you've got a much better chance. And it's also important to stress that gone are the days where you can just like say you're selling washing machines to say, what is a washing machine? AI knows what a washing machine is back to front. They want to know, what does your product do to resolve certain issues about a washing machine, or what special USPs has it got,
You talked about query fanning. When you're doing that, how do you know that you're not missing out on any serious opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, it's never foolproof, but this is why you should do multiple different places. You should look for information. For example, Reddit. I'm not the biggest fan of Reddit, but it is a great place for research because people are talking about things they may not necessarily go to Google or to large language models for, but it gives you that information. Also, there's other places like if you're in e-commerce like Amazon or YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, all these places can give you actually unique like snippets of what people are talking about that maybe your competitors aren't covering.
Okay, and then you've selected your topic, you've refined the queries that you intend to write about in the future, your query fanning, you've honed in your topic and what you want to cover in an individual piece of content. How do you decide what style of content is required to actually appeal to a particular question or topic that you identify?
Yeah, and that is important because you can't create a piece of content and then post that on X and then Reddit and then, YouTube or whatever. You need to adapt it obviously according to what works on that platform. So in terms of content now, this is the great question. Like in this world of AI and AI bots, how they extract information from websites are slightly different, obviously, to how users kind of consume in a way. I mean, some say it's actually a better experience for users, but they obviously want a very structured piece of content that's easy to understand, easy to extract the answer from a question or like a problem, well structured in terms of structured data, nice sort of fresh content. But then again, if you're putting that on YouTube, you need to obviously create a video around it. You need to then maybe extract kind of a shorts from that video that can easily gain additional reach. And then if you put it on social media, that has to be adapted to how those audiences prefer that content to be read on those certain social media platforms. Obviously, like, as we know, Instagram is totally different to like a TikTok audience. So that has to be slightly changed. So, yeah.
It was interesting when I started to ask you about how to decide how to style a piece of content, what a piece of content needed to look like in terms of, I guess, volume of writing and other elements incorporated within it, whether it was perhaps video based or audio based or kind of research based, and who would perhaps be involved in the production of that content and who would be involved in terms of quotations. You immediately went to platforms. So I was wondering whether or not you would tend to favor focusing on the audience and then the topic and then creating the piece of content and then deciding on the platform that was right for that piece of content, or you decide on the audience and then the topic and then considering the platform and writing the content for the piece of platform. So you'd think of platform before fleshing out what the content looked like.
It's a tough one, but I would personally say that if like you did that research and you understand that a lot of your users or a lot of your market is taken up by a certain platform, that's where you should put your focus on rather than the other way around. But in terms of content as well, it really depends on the industry. For example, if I work in health sector, we know that statistics and data-driven content does really well in terms of like these new AI models and the fresh content and kind of getting straight to the point. But it also needs that sort of EEAT element to it, that sort of trust factor. So we show how it's been reviewed, how it's been medically peer reviewed and that kind of thing. So obviously, depending on the sector, that will have to be taken into account. Yeah, that's what I think. I would you have to know your audience first before then you start creating the content.
Sean, what's the key takeaway from the tip you shared today?
Yeah, I think it's just important, obviously, as we said, to know your audience and to know what intent they have. And also you need to show up where they are. You know, you need to be at every stage of the funnel, every stage of the journey, and make sure that your brand is visible there and you're known as a trustworthy source.
Sean Barber is SEO manager at Macmillan Cancer Support and host of Search with Sean. Find out more at searchwithsean.com. Sean, thanks so much for being part of SEO in 2026.
Thank you.
I've been your host, David Bain. Get your copy of SEO in 2026, the book, over at seoin2026.com.